Nice to see you on camera, Stanislava and Jack. But before we get cracking on who is who, maybe it's nice indeed to recap what we're going to discuss today. And I think very shortly said, and I leave the rest to the questions and of course to the answers to get clarity, is I think data is one of the major drivers of today's discussion, and then linked of course to the digitization of payments. And of course, the topic is related to evolving fraud, because we see what we see in the market is it was always there, it was always present, but we see that it is evolving, or they're getting more sophisticated throughout the last maybe year or years. So it's good to have a chat with our two specialists, who I let introduce themselves before we get cracking. So Stanislava, maybe you can introduce yourself first.
Thank you, Wouter. My name is Stanislava, and I have been part of TIS since many years already. I started as part of the payment engine responsible for pay optics, and currently I am responsible for the evolution of our sanction screening and fraud prevention tools. So it is a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
I will take over. I'm also happy to be here today. I'm actually leading the pre-sale organization within TIS. But next to that, I'm certified fraud and risk management. So the topic is something that I really enjoy, and we be, of course, Wouter, happy to answer to the question you might have today on this topic.
Well, I do have some questions, and I guess the audience probably also has some questions. So in a perfect world, I can ask you questions, you can answer them, and everybody is satisfied with what we're doing today. Short introduction, maybe for myself or people on the phone or dialing in, is that I am working for TIS. I'm a colleague of Stanislava and Jack, and I am CPO of the company. Voilà, short introduction, done. Let's get cracking. Maybe Jack, right? You had the last word. You know that I will ask the first question maybe to you, is that let's get cracking on the digital tools, right? So in what ways do you see the evolution of digital tools in changing the landscape of treasury and payments and fraud?
So that is a very good question for the start. As we always know, everything has the positive side and the negative side of. Maybe we go first on the positive side, and then we can maybe enumerate some few negative part of the digital tools. So digital tools actually support the whole processes in all organizations, we always know. And that is the same that happened with when it comes to fraud and risk management in general. You have to think about, for example, advanced analytics or machine learning. These tools actually enable guys to have real-time monitoring of data, and then you can also have predictive analysis. Those two type of input support or tools support actually the whole fraud mitigation process, because you can actually rely on historical data that you have actually to predict also the future. So that is extremely important. And then you have those digital tools enable actually to tackle problems related to authentication methods. If you do payments today, you have authentication accesses that are very important to secure, and the digital tools are actually the ones securing them. That was not really the case in the past. And you have topic related to how you distribute multi authentications, right? We're talking about biometric topic also. We talk about automated reconciliation of informations. We had in the past, you have a company where a person is used to do transactions, and he is at the beginning and at the end of the process, and try to have intent fraud behavior, why he enter some information on the top and on the bottom another information. Today, with the digital tools, actually what you can do, the person in between can manage, analyze data and see lack in reconciliation, and also identify a risk. So that is something that is extremely important. People are not involved in the process anymore. It's automated, and then you can digest information to see the risk. You have the access methods that are very automated also and digitalized, and therefore it's easy to have security in that. And then you have machine learning, advanced analytics that enable to digest historical information and predict the future. So very, very, very important input that digital tools support for fighting against fraud or mitigating the fraud. At the same time, however, why the policeman, which is actually the treasurer, hopefully, is working very hard to reduce the attack, the digital tools are also used by the gambler, right? The other side. And therefore, they will come back with sophisticated cyber attack. That was not the case in the past. So they also use the technologies to attack your system. We're talking about phishing. We even talk about social engineering, which is the worst, because people can collect through your behavior within the organization and outside the organization information that will enable the fraud in your organization. So very, very bad things that can happen due to digital tools. You also have the digital platform can be actually explored, because somebody can take over the account information or also come into your capabilities to actually do on behalf of you, right, digitally. So I don't want to deep dive too much in that topic. Maybe you have other questions afterwards, but that is just to say the good boy and ladies are working to get a lot of work fixed within organization, use the tool to be more efficient, use the tool to be more optimized and to reduce the risk. The bad boss is using that also to develop and to counter the whole training and the whole security that exists in the corporate. So at the end, everybody have to be updated to make sure one party is not getting on top. And if then the party of the organization, of course, not the cyber attack.
Yeah. I think you gave a good overview, and I think the key takeaway is indeed, if you look at digital tools, but also an enablement, right? Although digital tools, in order to be, and I like this term, a police role, right? A police officer. I think this is what we tend to do, or need to do, or expect to do as well, and we need to be enabled. However, if you then come to maybe a difficult question is, if I link the tools or our enablers to do this, and as we think that we're all police officers, that this brings me to, okay, but then you need to know the key indicators, right, of fraudulent activity. And what should we monitor then?
So, and maybe before I answer this question, think about fake invoice. That is something, or fake CFO. That is something that is happening. It's on the media. It seems to be easy, but a lot of people actually fall in those categories and incorporate those money. So that shows you already an indicator, right? And let's also go back into the treasury and payment part. And if you look at the transactions, unusual transaction amount, right? I'm used to buy to a third party 100K, and then we have to buy 1.1 million. So the whole forecast are the same. There's no reason why it is high, but we have this transaction, for example. So you have variance into the amount in payment that can actually be an indicator of what is going on. You have also sometimes the small person hidden in the corporate can try to, or even outside the corporate through fake invoice, can try to get the money of the corporate through small transactions, not the big, just the small one. Cumulated is become big. And therefore, you don't even look at that because it's not significant at the first place. But that is something that machine learning or AI tools, we're talking about digital tools, will look after and say, okay, there's a pattern here that we we recognize. So that can be actually a indicator, right? That can be used.
So Jack, so Jack, you're referring to unusual large amounts, but also unusual smart amounts. And I think you're also referring to, because you mentioned it, like sequence, right? Like the amount of traffic that there is, correct?
Exactly. And even on not only the amount of the traffic, but also at what time it's done, right? In corporate, you know, close to the cutoff, people want to push some things and so on and so forth. You have to calm down and say, okay, what is the urgency of this transaction at the first place, right? So the timing is extremely important. Everything that is too fast, as usual, please take a break, right? It might be something behind this, but also transactions that happen off hour. So you can see, Walter, it's always about the extreme at the first place as an indicator, right? The extreme. But of course, something happened also in the middle, but that is those topics can be actually very well covered with the tools that are there. And then you have also the change on the payment pattern, right? And that happens often. That is actually the sources of fraud in corporate, in the normal, before even fake invoice arrive and so on. Because when you actually have new payee, you have new information that you have to put in the system. And that is where people try to put the wrong information, IBAN or bank account, right, of the payee. That is, so payee checking is extremely important in that whole process. How often do we do that? How is the process designed? Is it supported by digital tools? Do we call? Are we called when we do those changes? Extremely important. Can we check through digital tools the how can I put it? Can we check the bank account? Can we validate the bank account? Right. The bank account belongs to the third party. Very important. And then you have a topic related like modifying the instructions. So why is the instruction that came from the ERP system modified? What exactly, how many information are changed here? So it's extremely important. So we're talking about pattern in the payment in general. And then you have unusual behavior. So it's really the access. Normally, the person should access via authentication method, but he changed the standard, right, to access into the payment platform. That is not normal. You have the role mismatch, right? Normally, you have 4I principle. You have one person in the accounting department, sub-ledger pushing the payments, and somebody in the treasury validating the payments. And if something happened, like you have a lot of people in treasury doing both things, and that is not a treasury payment, question mark. So you have to look at this behavior. And then you have also the communication, how supplier changes are made. You have maybe also this kind of how often our master data are changed and are accurate, right? How often do we check it? How often do we check our signee in general to ascertain? Because fraud in the digital world can happen in a way that we don't even need digital world for at the first place. One example, because it's good to put it in the context, you have corporate everywhere. One corporate is somewhere in China, or Africa, or even in Europe, Eastern Europe, or even in France, somewhere in the Britain. So the managing director have been fired. He still have bank powers, right? Everybody forget it, that you need to go to the bank and change the power. Already a risk, okay? The digital tools via inventory of powers during the year can actually support avoiding this kind of risk. Because the person can still go to the bank and he have the bank power and get the money out. How do you manage this information to make sure that worldwide people having bank power are in an inventory process and their power are corrected in the system? Those are things that we can actually optimize without any fraud. So those indicators are extremely important for you to mitigate risk at the first place. And that is something that is extremely important for us to check. Maybe I will go one other topic that can be extremely important is the alert management. You have to stress test your system. How often I try to bring a fake transaction in the system and I got an alert, right? Sales protection measure, the IT, right? And also, how often are invoices irregular? If you often get irregular invoice, you might be a kind of candidate for fake invoice also. And then the reconciliation, like I say, the adjustment in the reconciliation, how often the payment file that were pushed by the ERP system, the reconciliation doesn't match afterwards. So that is already an indication that something can go wrong. I think that I try to give you precise and everyday cases. If there are further information or further requirement question, I will be happy to answer.
Super cool. I think you opened the floor for my next question, which is not for you, Jacques. I think you gave me a very elaborate answer. So Stanislava, I do have one for you, but maybe something interesting as well, which I noticed out of two sentences you mean, and then I'll ask my question to you, is that if you look at alert management, I think you hit a very solid thing, which is not always technology driven. Also, look at our company, right? We have a very strong security team, and what they do is, and it's kind of funny because it ties in, it's not equal to fraud or something, but they constantly trigger us, right? With making sure that we don't open links which don't belong, and if we do so, we're punished severely. And you know, they run like they do in the airport, like checks, regular checks on that we are still alert from that kind of. So I think you made a good statement there as well. And then of course, linked to my next question to Stanislava is that you mentioned checks on, for example, if a bank account is linked to the correct owner or company, right? Which for me opened, I'm sorry, the floor to you, because then you come into data analytics. And of course, how can we leverage this one? So this is basically for you.
Yeah. Well, data analytics, that's crucial, of course. At every layer that there is data, there should be an analytics tool in place that can analyze properly the data and draw the respective conclusions out of it. Whether that will be a blocking action, whether that will be a reporting, whether that would be a notification, alert, or alert management tool, doesn't matter. There needs to be such a tool. Challenges might come, of course, when you have data scattered all over the place. Like, for example, you have many ERP systems where you keep the data in different format, in different style. The database is not accessible from external sources to analyze it, and etc. So for sure, that's a challenge, but therefore there are central systems for payment processors, like TAS, for example, who can centralize that point and who can provide a possible data analytics on that and draw the necessary conclusions. Why it is important? Of course, there are different ways how it can be utilized. The first and most crucial one is, of course, real-time monitoring. That is extremely important in straight-through processing, especially if it is associated with a blocking action. Like there is a transaction, the transaction is screened. Is that transaction suspicious? Is it not? If it is suspicious, then it's crucial to be blocked for further analysis. That's for sure the most important impact. Of course, proper data analysis gives freedom to making predictions over it. So that is another way how you can utilize the data in order to predict future behavior, or also to apply anomaly detection on it, especially crucial for fraud prevention. Anomaly detection can be implemented over historical data as a rule-based tool. Like the customers can set up specific rules via which they can provide the patterns and everything that is going outside of those patterns can be detected and already stopped. That is one way. Another way is, of course, machine learning. Machine learning, yeah.
Stanislava, if I can interrupt you, can I ask a question on that last thing you mentioned? So you mentioned rule-based, right? So for me, this ties in, for example, what Jack mentioned on unusual amounts, for example,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Where you have a stretch. Is that from market? Is that like the markets or other companies? Is this how they approach this, like typical rule-based?
I would say both.
Okay.
I would say both. I would say both. The rule-based logic usually provides 100% precision. Everything is within the rule or something is outside of that rule. And especially if you have clean data with which you feed the model, because it's very crucial what kind of data you use. But again, for systems which are payment processors, usually in the inbound side, the data is cleaned so that these models get proper data to make the right analysis over it. If that data is good and can be used for a rule-based analysis, then such can be implemented. The other way that market can also utilize together with the rule-based is AI over that. Again, for anomaly detection. With AI, of course, we don't have the 100% precision of the results, but it can definitely be used on top to detect unusual behavior, what Jack already mentioned, which is outside of those defined rules. So like, for example, timing of the transaction, or let's say logging, or native language that is used, for example, that's extremely crucial for analysis of invoices. There are different ways how these tools and these technologies can be utilized to properly analyze data. So in terms of anomaly detection, our recommendation would always be apply both. And for me, that is the market standard also. Secure yourself with the 100% precision and leave space for a proper anomaly detection over machine learning. Because what is also important, it teaches itself over time. So it can improve with the predictive logic, and the mechanisms inside can get better and better over time with getting more and more feedback. Walter, you mentioned also validating the account. Of course, that can also be utilized for data analysis, especially if there is a service for such validation of the legitimacy of the account, like account validation tools provided by banks or by third parties. Nowadays, we have a lot, which can already provide enough feedback if this account exists, if it is valid, when it was opened. That's also crucial, because usually fraudsters open the account, fake the data, and withdraw the money within the same day, especially with SEPA Instant. That's completely possible. Faster payments, we know, instant payments all over the place. So usually that is the case, and then they close the account. So it's extremely important to notice when the account is opened, how active it was, and whether it belongs to the name which is provided. Also valid is what Jacques mentioned, that such kind of account validation tool can be applied in the beginning of the process when you create or update the vendor. That's also very vital, because that is giving you possibility to speed up the payment processing afterwards. If you know that your data is safe up front, then this can ensure straight-through processing. So
this is a very interesting piece, if I can jump onto this one, because you mentioned straight-through processing, but what I this is my personal feeling, and maybe also people that are listening in, is if you look at fraudulent behavior, what companies can offer is, of course, monitoring, right? Transparency and bringing it clear, like, look, you need to pay attention here, here, here. Do you also think, and maybe a question for you both, that you hear it a lot, right? Machine learning, AI, even rule-based, right? Or other mechanisms, they can just take it over, meaning, for example, you have a straight-through processing. If any of the logics in between just say like, oh, okay, we're 99% safe, or we think we're good, do you think that that is a good approach, or is it more monitoring, informing, with an action related to it?
Maybe I can start and Jacques can take over afterwards. AI and machine learning specifically as part of AI is something which is very beneficial and can definitely be adopted to facilitate your daily life, for sure. Not only for analysis, but also a very nice opportunity to utilize machine learning is within the area of false positives. Jacques already mentioned alerting and the alert management systems. If these kind of tools can be utilized as part of alert management to reduce the false positives, then that would be the best solution. This would not mean that they can take up 100% of the responsibility and we go just blindly, okay, I don't care, I approve the payment and I'm safe. Of course not, but it's not a silver bullet that we can apply. But at the end of the day, if it can guarantee with 99%, 99 is already a very high percentage for machine learning. Every data scientist will argue. Usually they go with lower, but if we can ensure 99% of accuracy, which even gets better over time with usage, then of course it can be utilized to reduce false positives and save enough time to spend on the real threats, the real alerts.
Yeah, and I want you to reflect maybe on something that I forgot before, but related to that one. I was talking about the, when is the fraud happening? I say when you enter new data from the third parties, right? You have new customer or new PE that you want to add in your system, and then the fraud happens. There's one critical fraud case that often happen in corporate on the data, and I talk with experience because I was actually doing intern screening of organization in the past, and where I actually found out a fraud case was related to when corporate implement a new ERP system. That's very dangerous. Because there you have IT can actually do everything, right?
Yes.
If you are not, and also corporate functions. So in that regard, machine learning is extremely important, because when the whole drama of that actually lasts 3-5 years sometimes, nobody's even aware of what is going on, the fraud happened actually during that time, machine learning can actually right away capture the deviated behavior, right? And inform. So extremely important. It was not possible in the past, so it's possible today. But we have to keep. We can use those tools. They are not the solution. They are supporting decision making. That is extremely important.
Yeah, I think that's the message indeed. Yeah, very cool. And I think that leads me to another one, right? I think you mentioned it as well. Is like, also in the case you just mentioned, Jacques, but it's a question for Stanislava, is I think everything that we just mentioned, or you guys just mentioned, is related to real-time data, right? Everything, a payment goes in and has to go out quite fast, so you can't rely on data from yesterday. That is not okay. Is that okay? Is that correct?
Yes, 100%. That's correct. You can never rely on all data, for sure. And usually it's very time critical. Fraud is also time critical. We notice nowadays fraud schemes like APP fraud, for example, which is immediate. Someone is impersonated, goes, takes the money, leaves, closes the account, and everything is done. Those money are usually non-refundable. So I will repeat myself, but the fraud schemes are getting more and more advanced with the advancing of technology, and especially with faster payments, instant payments, which allow such fraud schemes to happen. So real-time is crucial, real-time analysis, but usually fraud prevention tools have two sides. The first is analyzing, the second one is prevention. And the prevention part should always be real-time, because otherwise it doesn't really make sense to say on the next day, okay, we have already detected that your yesterday's transaction was suspicious. What can you do afterwards? Nothing. So it's crucial to implement a tool which is happening prior to sending to the bank. Of course, banks usually apply such tools for sure, but sometimes depending on the bank, depending on the technology inside, and also the data quality, it can not all fraud schemes can be detected. So usually it's crucial that every tool can be implemented prior to authentication and prior to authorization of the payment, so that it does not go out unnoticed or unmonitored.
Maybe I want to complete something here, because there's a very important topic. We always have to think about a system that is closed at the end of the day, right? And that is what we want to achieve. So I'm even telling, okay, you have to make sure that the static data are safe, because those are the data you hold in your infrastructure. They should be safe. And if you screen them, the way you enter the data, the way the data are actually changed, you are safe already there. But do not slip because you change the static data. That is exactly what Stanislava is saying. Because between the time those static data will be used and the time that the payment is done, there might be already a fake invoice, there might be already a CFO attempt fraud, there might be already a person in that line that changed the data, and so on and so forth. That's why you need dynamic fraud prevention too. That is at the kind of, the last barrier of checking barrier before you send the payment outside. And to have this link between static data and dynamic data, it's only possible today because of digitization, because there are APIs. Because the API enable to connect the two worlds in real time and to check the information from within your organization, but also do API calls in other systems outside the organization that we check before you validate actually the payments. So very important topic that is actually enabled through digitalization. It was not the case before, but we have it at hand. Of course, it's about data because it depends on the data, but also on the behavior of the person. But probably you will have another question on that later on.
I do have a question for you, Jacques. You had the last word, but maybe Stanislav, do you want to add something, or?
Yeah, when Jacques mentioned this, it came to my mind that it's also very important for real-time prevention, also in terms of sanction screening, because we talk about fraud, but actually sanction lists change even more dynamically every day. So real-time screening is also a necessity for sanction screening, because you need to have such a tool to be protected against paying to a sanctioned party.
Yeah, correct. I think a very hot topic, and good that you mentioned it, because it's not a light topic, right? It's something that everybody should consider. It also
the impact is
sorry,
crucial.
Yeah,
I would
absolutely.
think that the impact is quite high, like not only money loss, but also reputational loss. So it's quite crucial.
Yes,
Kind of
absolutely. Well, Jacques alerted to one more question that I have, and I will pose it directly. But I just wanted to highlight it's sort of my brainwave, and also where you mentioned like real time, right? The whole conversation was on real time, but that makes you wonder because you also mentioned real time payments. I think our clients are also, or people on the call are very aware of this. You can sometimes question this, right? How real time do you want your payments to be if you look at security, at fraud? Because it can also have a downside. Not that I want to scare anybody, but it actually triggered me in thinking like, okay, how fast can we be? How crucial is this? And I think everybody needs to look into their processes. Like, how fast does my payment really has to be real time? Anyway, this is my 2 cents.
But before you go there, you actually mentioned one important topic. I remember when I was sitting at the head of Treasury and financing and doing payments, there were for me always 2 roles, right? What we call today real time happening in Treasury or in the past with an MT11 to have a very fast track payments. But if you look back at the Treasury, even today, all Treasury are doing that. But for Treasury payment, it's so phased because you do transaction to your own company, or you do a transaction to a bank for a financing. So it is Treasury is not a function where you do stuff on stress, because when it's off, it's off. So the real time, you should actually forecast the payment, schedule the payments. But if you are in that position and you have to do real time, that means something is a mess already in the process of Treasury at the first place. And that is the best way to open the door for fraud also.
Yeah.
So real time is good.
If I would be in the audience right now on your statement that Treasury is not at speed, or what was I would immediately have a question right now, but okay, then I leave it to the audience. It's not, that's not exactly. Okay, hey, but I think you talked about.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let's be honest, because usually such fraud prevention tools take place, and that is a disruption in the payment processing. So no matter how fast the payment is, or how crucial it is for a treasurer to be under stress when approving, all those fraud prevention tools usually stop the straight-through processing or the real-time payments at some crucial levels. So it's a disruption that treasurers should get used to.
Exactly, better safe than sorry, right? I think that is whatever you can prevent. Okay, hey, this leads me to my final question. I don't want to keep you too long, of course. Is that Jackie mentioned data, crucial, right? We talked about it. Also API, right? APIs or other ways of getting that data real time in. Anyway, I think everybody's now interested. Like, super cool that you mentioned like 17 million things that are very important in fraud detection. But how do I get there, right? What are the typical challenges on doing this or integrating this data solutions?
So everything starts with people. Everything is about people at the first thing. Even to identify fraud, even to have a fraud in a company, it depends on people. That means you need first to have trained people on the topic. They need to be aware of the fraud scheme that are out there, on the fraud capability that you have. That might be, kind of emails and so on, or anomaly on the payments and so on. People can actually also see that. And that means there needs to be a culture of a mitigation of fraud. And that means also training of people. When people are trained, people are limited on time and resources. And therefore, you need to support the people in the whole process with processes that are very well defined, because you have already the knowledge, so you can define the process. Not define the process while you don't have the knowledge. That is what we try to do always. That's not working. First the knowledge, and then you define the process that you already know. That is good. And then, because your process is a human process and it's not perfect, look at software, look at digitization tools that will support that in the whole. And then you need to evaluate. We talk about evaluation indicator, how perfect the whole works. And that's say you need collaboration, you need HR, human resources in general being trained, but you also need tools. You need digitalization tools to strengthen your ecosystem and make it work, right? That is how you will actually achieve that. Without, if you only focus on one and you forget the rest, no, the other one outside the organization. And that is very, very important. While you are sleeping and telling that you're the best corporate and everything is fine, the other one out there, day and night, are relying on technologies to actually get you. And if you don't use the same tools or more, you will get one day hit by them. That's for sure.
Cool. Stanislava, anything to add?
Yeah, I can only continue Jack's logic. Fraudsters are there, are utilizing the technology in the best way. And unfortunately, AI has been working pretty well for them in the area of social engineering, in the area of deepfake. We notice more and more advanced fraud schemes on a daily basis. Like you can be sitting in the same conference room with people who are not the same people you expect them to be, or it's no longer safe to pick up the phone, call your supplier for confirmation of the account, because you cannot recognize anymore if you're talking to the same person. AI is so advanced in this area that you definitely needs the right processes and the right tools in order to prevent that from reaching you.
Yeah, I think that is very well said, by the way, and very true, right? It is untrusty. They are evolving. Like this is the topic, right? Where you just clearly said it. Like you can't even trust a phone call anymore. So we need to be very vigilant and make sure that we do the right stuff. And I like the fact that you linked it to people as well, right? AI is hot and buzzing, and it can do a lot, but it is linked to monitoring, prevention, supporting us. But the people factor, thank God, is still there and can help a lot. Before wrapping up the session, Jen, can I hand it over to you? And can you check if there are questions from the audience?
Sure thing, Wouter. We did have a couple questions roll in. The first one comes in from Sam. What are some of the best practices for training employees to recognize and respond to fraudulent activities? Who'd like that one?
It has Jack all over it.
I will take the HR part. So the first best practices is to get people in your organization aware of the type of risk out there. You can organize kind of training. I mean, security or IT in your organization can be updated themselves first, because it's not sure that they have the last knowledge. And when they have it, they have to spread those knowledge with training within the organization through assessment for the organization. They train them and they assess them. And they need to be aware of all the new fancy trends in that regard. That is extremely important. And secondly, is to test. You trust your people, that is great, but you need, without asking them, even TIS, for example, is testing the whole time. Sometimes I tend to maybe like, oh, is it really an email that is? No, it's not weird. That is not possible. So you need to test the people to have awareness, to make them aware of that, right? And the testing, you can then send a feedback. Oh, this time you actually you failed, right? It's funny at the first place, but it creates awareness, and that is extremely important. And secondly, you need to find out tools and train them in using those tools to make them their processes easy in the future and to captivate this. And I think if you mix the training, the awareness, and the tools, you might actually mitigate a lot of risk already within your organization. And then outside your organization, you are not involving in a closed environment while you try to manage your revenue and your KPIs. Other ones are doing the same thing, but their revenue and their KPIs are actually to get yours. And therefore, you need to be aware of that environment also, and make cultivate this culture of against the fraud mechanism in your corporate. That is the best way. When the culture is there against fraud, you reach already the most tools to mitigate risk related to fraud.
Super.
Great, thank you so much, Jacques. The next question and last question comes in from Laurent. How do fintechs and banks use data to collaborate on fraud prevention strategies?
Maybe I can take that one. If I understood the question correctly, it's about fintechs and banks and whether do they collaborate. We see a lot of area that has been developing for collaboration. Fintechs and banks usually collaborate on different levels. First of all, on gatherings that happen, or on consortiums that are organized in this regard. But also there's special tools which can be adopted for collaboration, and mainly for data exchange, because usually those are systems which have enough data that can be utilized for proper analysis, like, for example, the account validation. We notice nowadays a lot of regulations in this area, or a lot of services are being developed all over the place, like we have for UK confirmation of payee, we have for Netherlands, we have for India a special service for verifying accounts, also for Australia or other local regional validation tools. And it is really crucial to be able to exchange data between the different systems, whether it's a PSP or it's a bank or it is within the banks, in an ecosystem that can be developed for collaboration. But those databases need somehow to be combined in order to provide full protection, because banks are usually the primary source for validating the legitimacy of the account and whether this account is the right one and it is owned by the respective payee. Not only on that level, we see also a lot of awareness that has been brought in a combination of fintechs and banks. We see that they join efforts to educate their customers in the best practices. We also see banks being opened via API, something which Jacques already mentioned, to be able to share the data via API. That is crucial because you need somehow to equate the quality of the data so that it can be processed by every system. And last but not least, we see more and more banks partnering with fintechs to provide fraud prevention. It needs to be mutually separated, and each party should have its own interest into the tool. Like, for example, for banks, it's very difficult when a fraud transaction is detected or even executed. The process afterwards is quite difficult and cumbersome, so they prefer to transfer this protection prior to the execution or even prior to the authorization. What we see with verification of payee, the new regulation for account validation, for again providing the check for legitimacy of the account. So it is the new thing that is going on the market from next year as a mandatory tool to be implemented from September, if I remember correctly, which is adopted across European banks, coming from, of course, the European Council, together with European Central Bank, also validated with EBA. So there are different regulations in place and different initiatives take place that we see nowadays on the market. So this area is really evolving.
Super cool.
Thank you so much, Stanislava. Wouter, we did have one more question sneak in. Do I have time to ask it?
Of course.
Okay, this one just came in from Gary. What are best practices to guard against the deepfake deception that may occur when you picked up the phone to call someone to speak to them to verify before sending funds or performing a transaction?
Maybe I can start, and Jacques, if you want, you can continue.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I can add something.
Yeah. Of course. It really depends at which stage that the verification should happen. If you have received a phone call, for example, for changing account data, it's always crucial to have a tool where you can validate whether this account belongs to the same name that you are aiming to pay. That can happen in the vendor module upon editing of the data. Best is, of course, if that is integrated to some kind of account validation. And best, again, if this account validation can happen from a community, either the bank or some payment provider community. On TAS side, we have such. So it is best to validate this account upfront. Or similar technique can be implemented afterwards when the payment is being executed. Again, it is crucial to validate the account. Otherwise, you cannot know whether that account is really a legitimate one and you have already received this instruction from the right party.
I will add something that is related to the basic principle of accounting and the kind of normal expected processes in Treasury. You only pay what is booked, right? The debt fake generally happens on something that we've created. So normally there's a process is that on the procure to pay process, you have already the historical link to that. So normally, if that works, that should be fine. First, now the debt fake come on top of that and might add new conversation in the process. So that is how it's extremely important. It's a very easy rules, and I'm always wondering how people forget this rule. 4I principle. So if you have in place not one person doing everything, but another person who can actually question, it's already something that is great. Because let's assume deepfake based on the voice of your CFO. And then you have to do a transaction for, that is what the CFO, the fake CFO always, 2 million merger acquisition. How is it possible that nobody else is calling, only the CFO? Is it usual that he call you to do payments? When you enter this payment, what is the invoice behind this on the legal side, right? The person, why do you validate this payment alone? Why is another person not there asking? Okay, are you sure that we need to validate this payment? I have not heard anything. So if you cannot countercard deepfake itself, there are mechanisms that through the environment can help you on time to stop the process. And dynamic dynamic fraud prevention will actually help you, at least warn you on something not normal in the process. And then you can think twice and maybe have the chance to call yourself the CFO again, not that number that call you, but the number that you usually have. So it's more about culture against fraud in those regards. Of course, social engineering is playing a very big role in that. They do not call you where you are normal, in the normal stage. They know exactly the time you're going for lunch, and they call you while you're going because you will not have the time to be taken. But yeah, always the question mark, and then you can actually manage better this kind of topic. At least avoid a lot of them.
Yeah, I totally agree with Jack, and actually he reminded me of a use case that we had with the customer. One of the old used tools are actually passwords. Like customers exchange in the beginning of the conversation, starting years ago with their supplier, they exchange a password, and this password is transmitted every time they have a phone call for changing master data. So again, golden rules, education and awareness, what Jacques already mentioned.
Great,
Okay.
thank you so much, Stanislava and Jacques. Wouter, that's the end of QA, and back to you.
Well, it ends here, guys. So I want to thank you both for transparency. But I also want to ask everybody that dialed in, which I have no clue who that is, but if they have more questions or they heard something which was not in depth discussed, feel free to reach out to both of my colleagues, including myself, of course, and then we can take it forward. So thanks for the session, and have a nice day all.
Thank you very much, Walter.
Very much.
And thank you for joining.